Welcome to the Trending Tokens podcast featuring Jake Bale and Jeff Pulver. Today we discuss the future of security tokens, new post-pandemic blockchain applications, and some of the projects that we're involved with. All opinions on the Trending Tokens podcast are the opinions of Jake, Jeff, and the guests. Nothing should be taken as legal or trading or investment advice. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. We hope you enjoy.
How have you been, man?
Good. I've created a bunch of content. I've been doing 3 shows a week
I've
right
been
now,
seeing those come on.
and yeah, and I'm also working on well, 2 startups. One is a real startup, I should say. I have 4 ideas now. So when used to do Pulver.com 15, 20 years ago, some of the ideas that I had, similar to the ones I have right now, one of them became Vonage. One of them became Vivox, which is the voice engine in Second Life and in Fortnite and everything. And I'm sitting on literally 4 unrelated but similar types big ideas right now. But the idea incubator needs to be funded. From a practical perspective, I'm launching I decided rather than focusing on a conference, I'm going to offer my services to produce events, whether it's produce shows for people or host, curate, produce events, shows, networking activities. I have 25 years plus experience in the physical realm and the we call the online realm or the virtual realm. So the funny part was in 2007, I literally had an island in Second Life called Pulveria, which was a point of proof point of where the future could be, and I'm naming the production company Pulveria. So we're now actively looking for clients, people looking for help with their events. In some cases to advise, in other cases to actually produce. And this is outside anything that I'm doing myself, and it's just really if a company is looking to do something online and they're stuck, they need help, they just want to bring in someone who's great. I am available to do so. And during the life of Pulver.com, I co-produced not only my own events, but joint ventures I did with friends. And every once in a while, I did an event for a client. And one of the more higher profile events we ever did was the first ever camera summit on behalf of Nokia back in the year 2000. But it was in Maui, and I couldn't understand why in the world would people buy cell phones with cameras on them. And this was a Nokia executive summit. And I didn't go. I said, this is a total waste of time. So hopefully I'll have forward-looking clients like that in the future, but we'll see. So that's like primary starting September, which is like soon, since I need revenue. I would love to raise money for my incubator, my ideation labs, because these are ideas worth pursuing. But as my mature friends have learned, that without funding, there's nothing the ideas can go with. They all each one needs money behind it, or at least put money in the parent in the holding company, and we will do one entity through and through and see where it goes. So that's part of it, and I've watched the markets come back to life in the crypto, both in the some of the alts came back to life. I can't tell whether it's prop trading or whatnot, but it's happening, and it's interesting. And whoever would think that Overstock would go from $2.50 a share to $100 a share and up within a calendar year, let alone in less than a year. So that's kind of strange.
Yeah, the run. I mean, the T0 token ran up to $8.45.
I saw it as high as 9.
As high as 9. Yeah, I mean that's so everything sort of, and it's interesting. Were you following Link as it's been going up?
No, but what the token now is the last I looked, it was trading around $6. It has dropped below that again.
Oh, the T0 token is up right now. It's 450 is the last known price today. From what I've been
Okay.
seeing people talk about in the chat room, it sounds like there's some large sellers that are sort of coming out of positions, potentially those ones that were holding tokens for multiple people. So
Oh,
like a
did the
sort of
token
managed.
holders from 2 years ago finally liquidate, or are they still holding on to it?
A lot of them are still holding on to it. A lot of the people that have been waiting to get in, the people that weren't accredited and couldn't participate in the initial offering, they were able to get in at very low prices. So it kind of worked out well for them.
Yeah, at the expense of those who were accredited. So it's
Exactly.
funny. I have $500 that I wire transferred to Dino Securities in December 2018, and I never got credited for having $500 from them. I mean, it's the most ridiculous company, and I know the founder, and I thought I thought I might have consulting work with them, so I never pursued it. But I've never been around people who couldn't shoot straight before like
Oh,
them.
when I was working with T Zero, every other person that was reaching out when the Dino thing started ended up being me providing customer support.
I mean, basically, they truly were dinos.
Yeah, it was an app name. And then
So
I don't know if you saw the Aspen token started trading this week. Maybe $300,000 in volume traded between Monday and right now. That's the Aspen St. Regis.
yeah, I mean, I remember all the hype 2+ years ago.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
not to. I haven't really looked into the investment, but in my mind, a hotel or any kind of real estate, commercial or residential, is probably not high on my list of things that I'm looking to invest in.
I would say it's probably not something you want to invest in. Well, I guess it's your preferences, but if you look at the advent of COVID and what's happened, what's the lasting effects, what are the short-term effects, what do things bounce back from? It's some things I look like I'm kind of looking at the effects of COVID-19 like by looking into an open field where if you walk on the grass over time, the grass springs back, unless you bring a lawnmower in which case you cut it. And I can see certain markets coming back naturally, organically, and other things just forever changed. I mean, anyone who has a position in office space right now should be really scared,
Yeah,
particularly.
as if WeWork wasn't in enough trouble going into it.
Oh, and for WeWork and all the copycats,
Right.
it's not it's WeWork plus everyone who wanted to be like WeWork. And sure, historically there've always been, as much as there've always been golf clubs and private clubs, there has been, if you will, an elite office space club. If you're a traveler or you're within a certain type of portfolio of companies, you have shared common office space with common resources, and that just makes good business. But for all the Me Too plays out there, they're smothered. Those that are not capitalized will not be able to redo those building spaces as if it was high-end loft space, or it's like, because people, not only do they not have they realized they really don't need an office, they don't want to live in the city. There's been such a high demand for people living 20, 30, 40 miles away from the metropolitan area and up.
How far
And
are you from New York?
I am 18 miles east of Manhattan, 30
18.
kilometers, but 18 miles east. I'm in the first town in the on the North Shore of Long Island, which is on the border of Queens. One of the unspoken truths of people who live in Brooklyn and Queens is that they both live on Long Island. They all live on Long Island, but they don't say it. They think only people in Nassau or Suffolk County are Long Islanders, but there are no bridges or tunnels to go from Queens to Montauk. It's all one piece of contiguous land. It's a straight drive. So from a positioning perspective, I don't get that stuff. But it's so there's some stuff, right? So you have individuals moving out, families moving out, relocating. When it comes to luxury properties like the St. Regis, which is an amazing brand, I've stayed at St. Regis's. I've been to the St. Regis in Aspen. Super nice, super high end, and yes, there's going to be a group of people that will still be able to afford um, staying there no matter what happens to the economy. But we haven't seen such an economy since the Great Depression. Yet the financial markets seem to be coming from a different galaxy, and I'm amazed in a positive way how well they appear to be performing. So I'm okay with that. I'm just
I
like,
had a long conversation this morning with a guy from, he came out of Wall Street. He had about 20 years experience in Wall Street. We were talking about, where the stock market is and where all these different individual stocks are compared to where they were a year ago, a little bit more than a year or a little bit less than a year ago. And given what's happened, it seems very strange that they're where
The
they
whole,
were.
the whole thing seems propped up. I mean, it's like I spoke to a friend of mine whose wife is part of, well, we don't talk the stock market because his wife's a hedge fund trader, and his position always is that the market knows everything, and no matter how much insight I may have, you may have, well, of course the market already is taking all this into consideration. So it's like, it serves no purpose for me to talk to this person because he's always right, and unless he's wrong, but he won't admit that he's wrong. But it's the markets. This is why I don't trade. 20 years ago, 21 years ago, 22 years ago, I was an addicted day trader at times, and I couldn't breathe because I was so focused on the markets. It was always, the numbers were always in my mind, and I could just never do anything else. And this is while I was still running my business. It's just like it was such a distraction. But you look at luxury properties, and so I have a belief that 80% or more of business travel will be changed forever, and forever means to me at least over the next 3 to 5 years. That so many people finally realize that to do most business, we can actually connect via video, we can connect via broadband, we can connect via the internet, and there's no real need for physical face-to-face interaction, despite the fact that we want to be connected. Our ability to execute more effectively, more efficiently, save time and travel, and be instantly able to go into deal mode is so much more accelerated this way. So, I believe on one hand, personal travel with mission, where you want to go with intention to places, that side of the business goes up higher. But for people doing casual business trips just because it's convenient to go somewhere, not so much. And so when you look at brands that are associated with business travel, I worry about them.
Do you think that there's some things like the conference in Bermuda where you would need to be face to face to get a real good feel for, I mean, the group of people who was there? If it was a Zoom meeting, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't be
Um,
aware that you were around so many high profile people in the space.
well, what we really still can't do with Zoom, right, is we don't have a replicator. Well, look, we have 3D printing, right? But imagine Star Trek, where if you're on board the Enterprise or the later editions of different ships, you can more or less get any food you want, prepared for you, and it'll come to you. And I say that because it's one thing to be on opposite sides of a table with amazing people, but it's also something else to have a drink with them, or to socialize with them, or share a meal. And so we really don't have the ability to spontaneously deliver food to people while we're watching each other and talking to each other, so we could toast, or we could eat the same food and have shared common experiences beyond the visual connection. And I think we need to do things like that with Zoom, or not so much with Zoom, but just with how we connect and how we communicate, to really bring it to a more personal, physical being. I do believe that there's a real need for physical gatherings, particularly amongst leaders who want to see each other in the eye, who want to connect on a meaningful level, and to build those relationships, to build those bonds that hold up under stress, to build up those relationships that you're not just a name on a spreadsheet, but you're a person, and I can feel you, and you get to know them with a level of comfort that you just don't normally get if you just casually talking to somebody. So there's probably 300 to 1,000% more energy required to establish that type of relationship with somebody over a remote connection than a face-to-face meeting. And also, it's the energy. It's like when you're talking to a group of people in the same room, you could feel the crowd. There's some sort of nuanced awareness that you can just feel the flow, and whether or not your words are being absorbed, whether or not you're being heard. And we miss that, right? I haven't seen a communication platform yet that gives, if we use a rock and roll analogy, that it gives you the same feeling of being on stage at a large, say Madison Square Garden, whether you're in the audience waiting for the electricity to come from the artist you're in the room to hear, or if you're in the artist on stage in front of 18,000 screaming fans. It's a much different experience.
I saw a lot of those live streams of bands that were getting back together that hadn't been together in 20 years during COVID. And when I was younger and in high school, I went to a lot of concerts. It's cool to see those guys get together and do something on Zoom and have it all work out from a sound perspective, but it's not the same.
It's just not the same experience. If that was the first time you experienced that band, you might not be a fan.
Yeah, but, yeah, no, that 100%. And same with people. I mean, if you talk to someone on a computer, you might not get the right.
And you may not get the right vibe. You may get the wrong vibe. And so that's why I think, the more virtual. So I first wrote this in 1996. I called it, back then I had met Metcalf and I met all these other people with laws. So I called it the Pulver Law. And I basically said, back in 96, the more virtual we become, the more we need to have face-to-face meetings. And back then it was because of an email exchange that I had where I had missing punctuation and somebody misread an email that I wrote and got really angry. And no phone call would repair the relationship. I literally had to wait till I could see the person and speak to them and then clear the air with them. And this is back in 96 when the amount of email volume back then was nothing compared to what we have today. And so I do think there is a real need for gatherings, certainly for certain types of meetings. Or what's going to happen is that those types of meetings will come on board. They will be on Zoom or other online platforms, and the nuances will be missed. It will be a missed opportunity where we just they're not as efficient. If it's, if you have 100% efficiency for meeting face to face, I'm hoping that Zoom gives you at least a 70% efficiency rating. If you think about how effective it is over the long term to get your message delivered and connect and communicate with those who you want to. You may argue it's greater than 100% because you have all this time saved, that you're no longer traveling, you have no travel downtime, you have no travel expenses, there's no delays on air flights, you have no delays at the airport. You have no delays in weather and conditions and stuff. And you're not getting sick because you traveled someplace. So you may actually say that there's a super efficiency associated with doing things online versus the physical realm. But depending upon the situation, there are going to be times when we really would have done so much better had we just met. Because you could just.
For the last 2 weeks, I've been dealing with the way our school is doing it is the kids have alternating days. They have put them into two cohorts. So it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then the next week you're Tuesday, Thursday. So today is the first Friday that my son has been in school, and he's been in school for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And on the days that he's home, the teachers that are doing the meetings are also responsible for the kids that are at school. So the kid who's at home gets 15 minutes at 9:30 a.m. and 15 more minutes at 1 p.m. And the gym teacher sends an email and says he can't get his computer to work, so just dribble. And I was like, dribble a basketball or a soccer ball? My son said, I don't know. He didn't say, he just said dribble. So
this also puts you as a stay-at-home parent.
I'm in a very fortunate situation where my wife is home. So she's been able to help, and her mother has been here for the last probably 2 weeks. So she's been really taken a load off of me. But I know that there's a lot of parents in this district that aren't in a situation where they have that kind of help. And it's just, luckily I've heard that in the next 2 weeks, they're going to be going back to just a full schedule.
And they're here in the Northeast, it's been a mixed bag where it's stay at home or go to school or hybrid.
And we get a notice the other day that there's kids in other elementary schools in this district, like the next town over, that have COVID cases now. So now they're having these kids go home, isolating the kids who they sat next to in class. My understanding of the disease, and I'm not a virologist or a scientist, is that unless they're deep cleaning the classroom every night, there's not really a difference between breaking them up day by day and having some kids there one day, some kids there the next day.
It's just a higher probability that you're going to get sick.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
So here's the thing: if you're not in if you and no one in your household is in the high risk category, then it may not matter to you. But my mom is 82, I'm in my 50s, and I'm high risk but my mom particularly just in the age and stuff. So I do nothing in my power to put myself knowingly more at risk at getting something which we still don't know the science, not even so much about whether you have it or not, but what the secondary effects are after you get it. And I remember growing up as a kid, I had one issue, and then it got much worse because the secondary effects to what I had were much worse than the primary effects of what I was suffering from. And now I'm seeing in the news more people are basically getting reinfected. People that were sick in March and got over it are now getting sick again in July or August, and that doesn't really help so much. And so it's putting keeping the politics outside the science and trying to understand what's in front of us creates all sorts of challenges, but wonderful opportunities for blockchain, at least to understand the veracity of the truth of who's been tested, who's not been tested, and what the numbers of testing represent, and the data and the quality of the data that could be used for research and for R&D purposes and stuff. There's a lot of places where I actually see wonderful opportunities to apply some of the underlying blockchain tech for just managing large data arrays. But when you come to travel, so for me, like the St. Regis token to me was interesting as a proof of concept of how a real estate investment can be shared amongst others, and that how an incremental timeshare could be sold, because there was a time until today, frankly, that if you were buying a timeshare at Walt Disney World, it stayed in your family forever because it was very difficult to ever get out of that timeshare. And if you're able to use a token economy to effectively lay off my timeshare in this location and sell it to someone who wants to be there, if the terms and service that allowed me to become a resident of that timeshare allows me to sell it to someone else, maybe subject to qualification by the board or something, it makes it interesting. At least it makes it more fungible. So, but for me, it's not knowing the future of where we're going. There's things I stay away from, and there are things that I actually engage in. And so I do believe that there are certain companies that have shown that they do well. I mean, if you're in the e-commerce space, every day is Black Friday. Or Black Monday, I should say. That it's the day, both the day after Thanksgiving and the Monday after Thanksgiving, where so much commerce is taking place. So we've proven the internet can handle commerce. We've seen the internet can handle all sorts of business opportunities, including personalization of going shopping for you, and puts a real strain on the shop owners and the keepers and the supermarkets and the restaurants, but there's certain ecosystems that will flourish. Is there any surprise that the founder of Amazon's now technically, or was technically, worth over $200 billion? We've seen certain markets go up. If you're in the cable TV business, if you happen to be a provider of bandwidth, turns out to be a good pandemic business. If you happen to be a provider of online video technologies, happens to be a good pandemic business. If you help the world communicate, it's a good pandemic business. If you provide supplies that enable vloggers to share their vision, these all come into the good pandemic business side of things.
Something interesting about that, I ordered a mouse from Dell in the beginning of May.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many months ago?
Yeah, it's not here yet.
Yeah.
I did receive an email that it has been shipped, but
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about, it's been 3 months since I ordered it.
I had the same thing when I decided to rebuild my virtual studio by simply reassembling parts that I had here, and I realized I was missing a cable and we're missing a converter. I was so surprised that the delivery times on Amazon wasn't a day or two, but it was like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks. We'll let you know when we get it again. And it just, took me out of that mind space that Amazon was a place to go to for immediate delivery.
I mean, I think the growing concern is that it's coming from China, and when the trade with China is restricted, these people are selling inventory that they have. When they run out of this inventory, it's going to be a little while before it comes back. So the e-commerce stuff, although if you were in a good position leading into it, I think you were good. But I don't know if that's something that's going to be continuous if we keep having issues with import-export
supply chain.
stuff.
Yeah, certainly. Look, well, if you're just in the commerce business where it could be concrete you're pushing from point A to point B, if the concrete supplier is not there, hopefully you're not pre-selling the concrete. But sure, the same thing with PP, there's certain things I make wishes about that I wish I just didn't know, what the initials PPE stood for. But
I remember before I knew what that was.
I do too. It wasn't that long ago, but it's like feels like a long, long, long time ago that these are terms, and so we go through cycles, and even if there was a vaccine available today, in just this country, it would take months for everyone to get vaccinated, and that's assuming that it's efficient, and assuming that everybody wants to be part of that first, profiling. It could be that similar to downloads that I look for, like when a new operating system's coming out, I wait for the 0.001 update before I download the new Mac OS or the iOS
Get the
on my
worst
phone.
part of the bug out, and then
Right.
check it out.
And so if you're going to do mass vaccines, like where's trust? How do we trust? I mean, at least blockchain gives us trust, immutable trust of certain core values. But, oh yeah, there's a vaccine. It's like, okay, well, we know that a certain part of that curve may die, but it's a vaccine for most people. No, thank you. And so, you want to feel comfortable with stuff and make it, for me anyway, apolitical, that science is science. And scientists could disagree about how old the universe is. The scientists can disagree how many stars there are in the Milky Way galaxy or how many exoplanets there may be, but that doesn't have a profound effect on my survivability or not. And when it comes to biology, I take concern, and I believe to do no harm, particularly to my family and to loved ones. And so I don't want to take risks which are not needed, nor do I want to be the cause of others being at risk. So there's balance stuff there. So, for me, there's when I look at the effects of COVID on the business world, we have the future of work. What will work look like in the future? Do we need to have offices? If so, what kind? What a call center is going to be. Are there really going to be call centers? Or really going to be remote workers? How do we manage that? How do we deploy that? How do we teach? What is telemedicine? Well, we've always had telemedicine, but what do we do now with remote diagnoses? And how do we improve these systems? And so there's a lot of opportunities that I think got accelerated because of COVID, and some opportunities that were just missed. And I do think that we will see, at least around the United States, the return of what I call the milkman, where hyper local services will start to pop up, because rather than the restaurateurs that survived and the supermarkets or markets that survived all this pandemic economy, to get home delivery of perishable goods. So if you can't go out or don't feel comfortable going out, or you're just used to not going out, it'd be nice to have someone who's friendly, who who knows the neighborhood, come and serve you.
It's 1998, and Jeff is pitching me Webvan.
We just needed a pandemic, damn it.
I mean, I was in the Bay Area when that was launched, so I remember seeing those vans drive around, and I was like, wow, there's not going to be grocery stores in the future.
The Bay Area sees such a plethora of future ideas that it's timing, right? It's like, take Webvan and fund it so it will launch in April of 2020.
I mean, even if they just taken a couple items, a couple of the like really staple items that you're going to need every week, and just deliver those, I think they should probably try to do too much too quickly with that.
Well, they wanted complete inventories. It's sort of like those restaurants that have 50-page menus. It costs so much money for the restaurant to be prepared to create every dish on a 50-page menu. But if you have a 3-page menu, maybe not so many choices, but at least as much less inventory you have to carry in order to create whatever you're trying to sell to your customers. So yeah, Peapod also we had on the East Coast. Same thing. There's some things worked, some didn't. But I like the idea of personalizing it with home service with people that so you could have some level of trust. So they're people who know where you are, who don't need GPS to figure out how to route from one part of the neighborhood to the other. It's some sort of a really comfortable, warm and fuzzy feeling associated with the delivery of your food, and so you could trust the supply chain going at least from the market, to your front door.
It's funny. I never did the food pickup during the pandemic, I always went to the store because in my mind, if someone is bringing me the food and putting it together in the bag, that's just one more person touching everything.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I've the only thing I did during the pandemic for takeaway was pizza.
yeah.
That
But
was
to get the actual stuff in the store, though, I wanted to get it off the shelf, put it in the basket, and have reduce the number of touches by as much as humanly possible.
yeah, and yeah. So yes. Of course, we don't know whether or not any of those things actually were preventive or not, and I don't know how many diseases I might have caught previously by going food shopping. I never think of these things. I never think about
Same.
friends that may have been germaphobes. Howard Hughes, very famous germaphobe. Maybe he was getting it right. Maybe he saw that future where he needed to self isolate to stay away, or maybe it was a disease. You'll never know. But being aware of the biology is not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, but it's when we take it to the extremes that I find challenging. But I do think that decentralization of supply chains work for some environments, not necessarily for all, and that we are seeing growth once again in ideation, and that we get to rethink the future. That it's as much as the Clash in 1983 declared the future is unwritten. There's some people who may argue, no, 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 we're just going to do things the way we're used to doing things. But I do like the opportunity to brainstorm and look at a challenge and find alternative solutions, because eventually we may need office space once again. Maybe we need to readdress how we use that office space and office services. And so you have all these ecosystems, these trillions of dollars worth of services centered around core values that have shifted. Because if we're not going to be doing we work anymore, so then are we homing? So those of us who've had home offices for 20 years, we're ahead of that curve. We know how that story goes. But there's probably a large percentage of people who never had a home office. So there's lots of supply opportunities to start selling products to the rest of the United States, to the rest of the world, to want to establish home offices with the accessories, with the connectivity. And that's where that broadband game comes in, because now all of a sudden there's a higher demand for connectivity to enable things like Zoom chats to be seamless. And a lot of training and a lot of relearning of how to do old things. And if you're used to having an office manager working with a team to get services, supplies to you, now you have to learn to be self-sufficient. You have to relearn and become, at least survivable with certain core skill sets to use the word processing applications, the spreadsheets, the I would say call it PowerPoint presentations, but the ability to be efficient in your game. And then it's also learning about video and audio on the internet. I mean, you don't want to look like just everybody. I think you want to have good sound. You want to have good video. You want to have pride in how you look. If you're going to spend 8 hours a day on camera, you want to make sure that you, I think, care about how you come across. Because I do think if you sound credible, you are credible. And that if you if you can't be heard, you won't be seen. So there's so many things that come into play when you're actually operating like this. And growing up in the Northeast, one of the things I loved about school was snow days, the magical day where all of a sudden school is canceled. If you're going to do homeschooling, does that mean that that snow days are gone forever? It's like, and
I remember that growing up on the East Coast. It was the winter of '95, I think. We had a whole week. There's 5 days
it's
in a row.
magical.
Yeah, so it's 2 weekend days, 5 school days, and then 2 more weekend days. And snow that was up to your neck.
And it's like, now if you're going to end up, whether you're doing remote distance learning at home, or you're getting homeschooled, or you're doing something, but you're still in the education flow, if your parents are teaching you stuff, what's a snow day?
Yeah.
Every day, or no days.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I've had 200 snow days.
I think some of us have.
For the parents, it's 200 snow days. For the kids.
Yes. Yeah, I am, have you discovered things about yourself that you're more passionate about now than you were 200 days ago?
I'd say a little bit. Trying to help my son get into music a little bit. So we've got some like a little drum machine. He's trying to learn how to play the drums. And so I guess some of the stuff that on days where he would come home from school and I'd be too tired to do something, I have more time to sort of do those somethings, or figuring out when that fits in the day. So I think from a family perspective, it hasn't been the worst thing. But then from his social perspective, it turns out that it's, we had all kinds of stuff. They're doing Skype calls. The kids are jumping on, they're doing the same thing that we're doing right now. And they were doing it every day.
Really?
Without that, yeah, oh yeah. And without that, I mean, I think that's how all these kids got back in. I don't know if you heard, there were some kids that were in their classes and they took a still photo of themselves and used it as a background so the teacher would think of it. Like that kind of stuff is, you find out who the genius kids are, like the ones that are doing that. It might not be the most, education promoting thing, but the kid that does that that's a kid that solves problems.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that there's a lot of learning to be done on the through the internet.
Well, also, we were not necessarily ready for that snap to all of a sudden put the whole world on Zoom. Zoom's not the de facto answer to everybody or anything. And that, distance learning was something spoken about for 20 plus years, deployed by, University of Phoenix and some schools and some major colleges, but not everybody. And, if you had a chance to re-engineer a product once you see all the ways it's used, you might think of better ways to communicate more effective, more efficient things. And so the advent of this pandemic, I think, will give birth to tens of competitors that Zoom never had.
I mean, higher education has to totally change because these colleges that aren't having a semester this time, kids are being told to take their classes online. The value is not there for what the cost of college is. Like, I
Yeah, I
think there's
mean,
going to be a dramatic.
could you imagine paying the same tuition whether you
No,
had a
no.
social? I
I
call
went
it a
to San
social
Diego State. It
education.
was like $2,500 a semester. I couldn't even imagine doing that if it was online. That would
No,
be something that I would say was worth $200. Ten
right.
percent of what the.
So you have colleges and both public and private schools may go out of business. Some of them because they cannot afford the economics of what it's like to be online. Not everyone has the endowments that some of the schools in the Ivy League have. On the other hand, school might be more affordable. But what if all the university professors who and all the people that have been teachers over the last 90 years that are still alive that still want to teach went online? We could actually disintermediate the education system and teach people who want to learn with or without certification. We can actually bring knowledge to the people in a way that's not been done. Because you could take a class of almost anything on YouTube, but you don't have a teacher. You don't have anyone to ask a question to. But if we were to bring together, 4 or 5, 10, 20, 30 million educators, bring them online and let them teach the people, not in just their local place, their neighborhood, but the world, we could transform education and rise it to a point which we've never been to yet. Anything becomes possible. We just need to now allow ourselves the freedom to reconnect dots that never assembled a certain way, that give us the opportunity to innovate on platforms which forever were locked being this is the way we do it.
Yeah, standardizing education and determining who's learned what. Maybe it's a blockchain solution thing, tracking your classes that you've taken. Are they certified? Is the teacher a person who you would sign off on for like a college credit, or is it a high school credit, or whatever the case may be. But you could take 100 classes, and if there's not a record of it, because you have to walk into job interviews with a degree. I got a degree from this college. These were my grades. So there's an interesting.
Well, if it's a technical job, maybe there's a way to test somebody to figure out, or do an assessment, what is their actual skill set, because it is hard to figure out. It's one thing to pay for your tuition. What did you really learn? What did you actually bring into the workforce that's meaningful, that's useful? Or do we have to just say that your degree qualified you to have a job, and now we have to teach you our way of doing your job? I mean, it's a lot of investments. And what about homeroom? I mean, if we can start to actually enable people to socialize online, different than the physical realm, but find ways for people to interact, to be safe, not to be bullied, to be loved, to learn, to socialize, to flirt, to grow up in ways. I mean, because part of what I was thinking about is also the future of space travel. what happens if your family's on a 3-year, 5-year journey to Mars, where you're going to go, or your family, you're selected to actually go live in the lunar module that's circulating the moon. You're going to be remote. You're going to still want to learn. You still want to breathe. You still want to interact socially. And there's certain norms that haven't been created yet, except in sci-fi, and how we're going to socialize and how we're going to connect and how we're going to just interact. And so some of what we're going through right now could very well be a foreshadowing of what happens in the not too distant future when we start to colonize planets and spacecrafts in orbits around other planets.
I feel like higher education has definitely got to be one of those things that is going to be changed the most if and when it comes back after the pandemic is over. Or if there's never, or if the pandemic doesn't end and there's continuous people, they're going to have to figure out how to do that differently because the value proposition just isn't there anymore.
Do you think it's any coincidence they're filming Matrix 4 now?
I'm excited. I remember when that came out.
I do. I remember the trilogy, but maybe this is the other side of that Matrix.
The idea of being in a bubble, man. Yep. I'm not.
Well, we're in a different kind of bubble, but yeah.
Plugged in voluntarily for now.
Yes, we're definitely plugged in voluntarily. Wow. So how's the how's the crowdfunding world doing these days?
So I just closed out the company that was making a CBD product that has no THC in it. They just closed out the full crowdfund at $1,070,000.
Oh wow.
Yeah, Jet Token is at about 5,600,000, somewhere in that neighborhood, raised so far out of 10 that we're trying to do, and that's a Reg A plus. There's a couple other crowd funds that are a little bit earlier stage, and like the Delays with the Meta Knights. We're about to cross $250,000 raised on that one.
Oh, he should be happy. He knows you.
It's going really well, and he's working on a COVID tracing app also. So on the MetaMe side.
With him, I'm not surprised. He's a pure genius.
Yeah, and so that project has been a very, very. It took us a while to get started. When we launched the first time, everything didn't work as well as we thought it would on the advertising side. We seem to have most of those kinks worked out now, and now the company has cash flow, and they're able to sort of go out and make these deals.
Would you recommend these platforms to somebody who's launching someone who has 25 plus years experience producing events, to provide some seed capital for this Uncle Cyber production company, but someone who can use a little bit of capital to jumpstart a high growth events production business?
I'd pitch it for sure. I mean, it's right. You're right in the same sort of vein of what everything that they're working on is sort of cutting edge and utilizing blockchain and solving these problems. The comic book is, I would imagine, sort of a passion project for him. Like, grew up with comic books, and that's awesome. But the comic book is a lot more than just a comic book. It's an educational tool. It's something that teaches you about how to use a wallet. It's all these other things. And I would, the meeting stuff and it all falls right into the same. So I think that it would definitely be worth pitching.
I'd still believe that the blockchain industry missed the point when they created a vocabulary with words that were meaningful only to the blockchain community and not to everyday consumers. Because I think that some of these technologies will be adopted at a blink of an eye when we don't need to have a digital wallet.
Especially if you look at like an original Bitcoin wallet on a computer or something, and you're trying to explain that to someone, and they're like, "How is this a wallet?" In your mind, you're just thinking, "What do you mean this is a wallet?"
Well, put it differently. If you have an account with the ABC Bank and you happen to buy and sell IBM some days, you don't think about You may think about settlement for when you have access to your cash, but you don't think about necessarily, oh, gee, I want to download 3 of my IBM shares right now because I want to go out and buy a product with it. So there's no concept of trading, if you will, needing to download my shares or my ownership of an incremental part of my holdings. But we could have made it. Someone can still simplify this by simply changing the words, not the regulations, but just making it so it's much more consumer friendly. So those people that are outside, when I was doing public policy work, there's this expression outside the Beltway, where people within the Washington D.C. corridor, they speak a certain language and they do certain things and they focus on politicking and lobbying and getting stuff done. But people outside Washington don't necessarily even appreciate what it takes to make things happen. And if there was a Beltway for the a blockchain industry, I would say people on Main Street on the other outside the Beltway, they still today could benefit from a realm that didn't use certain terms, where stuff just worked and payment solutions were integrated into other products, and we didn't have to know or distinguish between one thing or the other. It was whether you're doing a Venmo or a PayPal or this or that or a Patreon, this or that. How things get transferred, as long as you have an intention to receive and your intention to pay, you receive. Why make it hard? Why does one need to learn a new vocabulary?
I think Ethereum did a lot to take us in that direction, and then it sort of got abused a little bit. But I feel like with people learning how to invest in ICOs and all that kind of stuff, there was a lot of education that was distributed, more so than would have ever happened if it was always just Bitcoin. By having that sort of secondary use case and having people understand how, even like MetaMask as like a Google Chrome browser.
Yeah, no. It's a MetaMask was certainly wonderful. At least it was a wonderful innovation when it happened. But like going into 2021, I just find it ancient that, particularly if things on the internet, accelerate faster than dog years, and every year is an accelerant of the other. Going into 2021, from the blockchain perspective, some things are not so revolutionary or evolutionary still. I'm still waiting for that moment that the rest of the world has the opportunity to participate in some of the magic that only a small segment of the population has partaken in so far.
Yeah, and out of that small segment, a lot of them have lost money in it. So had the negative experience.
We're not talking about the riskiness of investments,
Right.
of course. Yeah, of course, everything's super high rate. I'm just saying from a tech perspective, because it's one thing to have APIs where you're problem solving and simply taking building blocks and visualizing something and solving it. But that only goes so far. But if you want, I've met, not in 2020, not even 2019, but I remember sitting down with people were so enthusiastic about what they were reinventing or rediscovering or resolving for, using basic elements of trust by being able to use a blockchain solution. Particularly folks at the IBM incubator, when I met these people, all very smart people, but when it came down to how consumers would interact with their products, they all spoke about wallets. They spoke about like certain core things, which I understand it, but I was pretty sure that the public did not. And if you're creating a better mousetrap, I would trust you're creating a better mousetrap, and you don't have to actually show me the type of metal that you're using for the mousetrap. I can believe you, but these people would actually show me piece by piece the parts list of how their product was developed, and it's like, no, I only care about the finished product. And I still think today that there's a lot of legacy people who don't let go of user interface challenges, which, if it was looked at or resolved in the near future, you might find a lot more people using stuff. I mean, the only analogy I can share is that when voice over IP was happening back in the 90s, middle 90s, when people were experimenting with it, it was a hobbyist who first played with it. And ultimately, not that long ago, every major phone company in the world uses the technology, at least on their backbone, and its existence is totally transparent to everybody. You don't know that trillions of minutes a year, trillions and trillions of minutes, are all voice over IP minutes, because no one ever calls it out. And some people, if they heard that, they say, oh, wow, that's why my phone calls don't sound so good. But the reality is the calls sound better, much better.
It's interesting with contract tracing, you might end up having more people have a blockchain-based app on their phone.
Exactly.
Just because of COVID. It has nothing to do with anything else. Not wallets, not Bitcoin, not ICOs.
This is the point, right? That you want to trust the data source. You want to be anonymous and autonomous. You want it to be certifiable. You want the trust of the central authority who's managing it. You want to be able to hand off from one authority to another. You want to be able to decentralize it, but yet at the same time have responsibilities for certification. So, you know, yes. So contact tracing with blockchain, I believe, is one of those killer apps. Oh God, what horrible term! But one of those applications that will take blockchain into the mainstream without the mainstream knowing it.
Yeah. That's
And, done right, it will save lives, millions and millions of lives. Because this is not just about this pandemic. The idea that we can actually use blockchain in medicine or blockchain for to prevent any disease from spreading, or for that matter, managing containment, or for that matter, doing DNA traces. There's so many different
or
things.
keeping track of the data. When
Well,
you
it's
hear
all
about
right. Well, the cool part is we're all big data, right? Your DNA is a big data project. You bring a community together. That's a lot of big data. And I find it fascinating the way that some testing is done is they actually bring a bunch of they put a lot of blood samples together in one pool, and they test the entire pool to see if any of it was contaminated. If no one comes up positive, then all of a sudden you could you could test 500 people at the same time, because you put everyone's blood, and then if all of a sudden there was a positive, then they start out looking to figure out who individually or which group actually was positive. And when you were on campus and you could do contact tracing, you could figure out, oh, it was the person 3 doors down from me that started this. Because I remember reading about a super spreader event in Boston where I think there was a conference in February, at one of my favorite gathering spots, being an alum of the Lotus Development Corp ecosystem. I think it was in Cambridge, and I think it was 56 people got together, and they were not the first, but they became a source of effectively a super spreader event.
right.
Based on the contact tracing since February, those 56 or 57 people were responsible for infecting 20,000 people,
Yeah.
which is crazy. But they know that because they could do based on the samples, they know what the DNA of the disease was in Boston or Cambridge back in February, and they can see how it mutated through and through. So I think that there's some wonderful things that blockchain can do and give us, both especially in science, especially in the management of big data, where we want to trust the results, where we want to trust the underlying input of where the data came from.
Yeah, a lot of opportunities there. And that's what Dele and MetaMe, the whole thing is owning your own data, not just on the contact tracing side, but the whole business is about owning your data from companies like Facebook and Google, putting their little tracking pixel and following you and listening to you on Alexa and serving you ads from what you're thinking about and all that kind of
It's
stuff.
so creepy. I mean, how often have you actually spoken to a friend about a topic and all of a sudden that topic showed up in your ads?
There's times where I am sitting uncomfortably for a while and start seeing ads for chairs. So I'm wondering if they're hearing me shift around in the chair on my mic and they're like, this guy needs a new chair. He's uncomfortable.
They're hearing your grunts and translating that into a demand.
Exactly.
Or
Yeah.
maybe they're tracking your eyeballs to see how bored you are on certain calls.
That's my
And all of
big
a
thing with this new computer I got. It's got the eye tracking thing on the bottom.
Oh,
So if the screensaver's on and I walk in and sit down, the screen comes on because it sees my eyes look at the screen.
Oh no. I know. No.
I know. It's a brand new computer, so I don't want to put tape over it yet, but I don't
Oh
like
my
that kind of
God.
stuff.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Well,
So
Jeff, I hope everything's going well out there and you stay safe. And
one way of staying safe is by going nowhere.
yeah.
I hope the school stuff. I hope your no one in your son's school is infected. I hope that you're able to stay COVID free. I've run into a bunch of acquaintances and friends that have had COVID, and I didn't know it at the time. Not everyone shares it on Facebook.
Yeah, I was going to say if I found like that's an interesting, because I have seen the celebrities will come out and say when they have it, but I don't expect that everyone that I know is going to be like.
No, you'd be surprised. A lot, and some of my friends have severely been affected. I mean, they talk about it being a sign that you have it if you lose your taste, but when does it come back? And one of my friends said, "Well, I have 75% of my taste back, but he's been allegedly recovered for almost 4 months, and It's these are the things that we don't know. At least I don't know. That finds you know every other time in my life I knew with absolute certainty how things might be, and in dealing with certain unknowns, with no one really giving a straight answer, leads me to want to stay safe, stay isolated, and wish everyone well, and hope that all my friends are don't have it, or if they have it, they have a speedy recovery and fully recover. And I just worry about while we're still learning, and the prices that will be paid by those who become the inadvertent sources of the learning.
Yeah. It's funny. I think it was about a year and a half ago that you and I were talking about being 2 years too early in tokens. Now there's a trend. Now we have a token. A new token has been launched, and we can talk about the trend of the token. We should start doing this every week and make sure that we're covering what's going on now that there's action going on.
Well, I'm very, 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 very excited that that the Aspen token is trading. And I guess in my mind it was obvious that there would be markets outside of the known markets that people can speculate and people can do their magic and take positions. And I do believe over time we will see an revolution in the financial market space. And maybe it won't come as fast as I once thought, but I think it is inevitable that change is upon us, and that there's a tremendous opportunity to be part of a growing worldwide ecosystem, that it will not matter where you live. If you're connected to the broadband internet and have decent connectivity, you can participate. And yeah, so it's interesting times are ahead. I wish everyone, you and your family, to be safe, and I look forward to catching up. And I do thank you, because it was you were the inspiration for me ultimately of dusting off my times behind a microphone. It's been 15 years before since I shut down my internet TV studios on Long Island. So
you have to do it. I'm still not confident enough to get on and just talk by myself.
Oh, I
mean that's
for a year. That's I have the Almost Daily Jeff, and I'm now in season 2, because season 1 ended sometime in May, and now I'm back to 2-3 episodes a week. What I really need is an editor, because there's some stuff in my broadcasts that are of the day or of the week that I'm broadcasting, just trying to be relevant to the people I'm talking to that are watching it live. But I want to edit out the stuff that's that stuff, and put in the podcast just the greenfield opportunities.
That's really interesting. You know that's what Spotify is doing for Joe Rogan. They're taking all of his old podcasts and they're pulling out the content that is timeless and putting that, and they're categorizing it that way.
Oh,
and
wow.
then they're taking the stuff where they're talking about something and when I'm looking for something to listen to on a daily basis, where I'm getting news through YouTube or through various people that I'm subscribed to, if I don't hear it within a couple hours, I don't really want to hear it anymore. No, somewhere else.
Well, so I have 4 or 5 episodes of Almost Daily Jeff for season 2, and each one of them, it just needs a little bit of a push. But I decided that I just should mention that the sponsors I've been able to get from season 1 stayed with me. So for me, it's the numbers. I'm sponsored by the numbers 1 and 8, because together it brings life. The letters LOVE, because we just don't have enough love in the world, even though the letters WTF, everyone's pop up. They will want to overbid the love, but I stay with love. The color purple, because whether I wear it or not, it's part of me. And the new sponsor for season 2 is Pulver.com, which is the home of the Jeff Pulver Network. So I'm having fun. And I love the opportunity just to be there, to be present, and to be connected to. And while I have no idea everyone who listens to the podcast, I see that according to the stats that you help manage, that it's heard in 18 countries. It's like, okay, I'll take it. Just being heard by one person to me matters. So it's I like having the platform to capture ideas. To me is priceless. And particularly when I do a session, I don't remember what is said. I at least I know it's recorded.
You never know when something you say is going to change someone's entire life. You might say something and give them an idea. 20 years later, they come back and say, Jeff, I was listening to the Daily Jeff, During COVID.
I will share with you that one particular person 2 weeks ago sent me not like that, but something similar. I've never had anyone binge listen to me before, but this one particular person I think listened to me for 5 episodes or 5 hours, whatever it was, and I didn't know how to respond to it. It's like, oh my God, wow, really? You were listening to me for that much time? Whew. So
You can
I'm
change
humbled
lives,
to
man.
that.
One life at a time.
Yes. Anyway, nice to see you.
It's
Nice
good to see you too,
nice
Jeff.
to
I hope
connect.
everything stays well over there. Stay safe.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
we'll be in touch. We'll set up a call for next week and try and get a guest this time. Maybe we'll get one of these
This would be
guys.
great.
All right.
All right.
It's good to see you, man. Have a great day.
Nice to see you. Bye bye.